Jake Morrison stood at the bridge window of the transport ship, watching the alien fleet surround them. The massive Vorthak warships looked like giant metal snakes floating in space. Their dark hulls gleamed under the distant stars. Behind them, the glowing ships of the Zephyrian Collective moved like ghosts. "Almost see-through in the darkness, Commander. They're sending another message," said Lieutenant Pete Collins from his station. His voice was tight with worry. Jake nodded. "Put it through." The main screen flickered to life. Admiral Kresh appeared, his reptilian face cold and unforgiving. His yellow eyes stared directly at Jake. "Human vessel, you will follow our ships to your new home. Any attempt to change course will result in your destruction." The message ended abruptly. Jake felt his jaw clench. Around him, the bridge crew sat in silence. They all knew what this meant. After 6 months of trials on the Galactic Council station, humanity had been found guilty. Their crime was being too violent, too unpredictable for civilized space. Dr. Lisa Grant walked onto the bridge, her tablet in hand. Her face was pale but determined. "I've finished analyzing our destination," she said quietly. Jake turned to her. "What are we looking at, Lisa?" "Kepler 442c, she replied, her voice steady despite everything. "It's a death sentence disguised as exile. The planet has twice Earth's gravity. The atmosphere is full of sulfur compounds that will burn our lungs. Electrical storms rage across the surface every few hours. The wildlife," she paused, swallowing hard. "The wildlife makes Earth's most dangerous predators look like house cats." Pete Collins shook his head. "There has to be something we can do. We can't just accept this." "We don't have a choice," Jake said firmly. "Look around us. We're surrounded by ships that could turn us into dust in seconds. Our weapons are useless against their shields. We have 2.3 million people on these transport ships, and they're all counting on us to keep them alive." Through the speakers, they heard the voice of Captain Steve Blake from another transport ship.
"All vessels, this is Blake. We're receiving landing coordinates."
"Looks like they want us to set down in some kind of valley system." Jake activated his communication system. "All ships, this is Morrison. Follow the alien escort to the surface. Prepare for emergency landing procedures. The gravity is going to be rough on our people." As the human fleet began its descent toward Kepler 442c, Jake could see the planet growing larger in the view screen. It looked like a red and orange marble covered in swirling clouds. Lightning flashed constantly through the atmosphere, creating a web of electric light across the planet's face. "Commander," said Maria Rodriguez from the medical station, "we're already getting reports of people feeling sick from the gravity change. Dr. Amy Watson is distributing medicine, but we need to get on the ground fast." The ship shook violently as they entered the atmosphere. Jake gripped his chair as the bridge crew fought to keep their stations. Outside, he could see sheets of acid rain washing over the view screen. The ship's hull groaned under the stress. "Landing zone in sight," reported Collins. "It's actually not as bad as I expected. There's some kind of natural shelter formed by the mountains." As they touched down, Jake felt the full weight of the increased gravity hit him like a hammer. Every step felt like he was carrying another person on his back. Around the bridge, his crew moved slowly, clearly struggling with the change. "All right, people," Jake said, fighting to keep his voice strong. "This is our new home, whether we like it or not. We need to get organized fast. Pete, start surveying the area for the best spots to set up temporary shelters. Maria, work with Amy to set up medical stations for people having trouble with the gravity. Lisa, I need you to find us water sources and figure out how to make this air breathable long-term." Over the next few hours, Jake watched as humanity took its first steps on Kepler 442c. People stumbled and fell as they tried to adjust to the heavy gravity. Children cried as the strange air burned their throats. The older colonists looked around with fear in their eyes at the alien landscape. But Jake also saw something else. He saw Pete Collins helping families carry their belongings to the shelters despite his own exhaustion. He saw Dr. Watson treating injured colonists even though she could barely stand herself. He saw young Kyle Murphy, only 16 years old, already adapting better than the adults, helping other kids learn to walk in the heavy gravity. By evening, they had established a basic camp in the valley. Jake stood outside his temporary shelter, looking up at the alien sky. The planet had 3 moons, and they cast strange shadows across the landscape. In the distance, he could see the shapes of creatures moving through the darkness. Some of them were huge, easily the size of Earth elephants. Lisa Grant joined him, breathing heavily from the effort of walking in the thick air. "I've got some good news and some bad news," she said. "Give me the bad news first," Jake replied. "The electromagnetic interference from all those storms is going to make most of our advanced technology useless. Our computers keep crashing, communication is spotty, and forget about contacting Earth or any other human colonies." Jake nodded grimly. "And the good news? The soil is incredibly rich in minerals. If we can figure out how to work it, we might be able to grow food. Also, there's a freshwater source about 2 kilometers north. It'll need to be filtered heavily, but it's drinkable." "That's something at least," Jake said. As they talked, Captain Blake approached them. His uniform was torn and dirty from the day's work. "We've got the perimeter set up," he reported. "But those creatures out there, they're not afraid of our lights or our noise. We're going to need better defenses." Jake looked around at their small camp. Families huddled together in temporary shelters. Children pressed close to their parents. Everyone looked scared and lost. But they were alive and they were together. "We're going to make this work," Jake said, his voice carrying across the camp. "I don't care what the aliens think. I don't care how impossible this planet seems. We're humans. We survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and everything else our own planet could throw at us. We're not going to let this place beat us." Some people nodded. Others just stared at him with hollow eyes. But Jake saw something spark in a few faces. Hope, maybe, or just stubborn human determination. As the night fell and the 3 moons rose higher, Jake made a promise to himself, and to everyone counting on him. They would not just survive on this death world. They would find a way to thrive. The aliens had made a mistake thinking they could break humanity by abandoning them here. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. 5 years had passed since the ships landed in the valley. Jake Morrison walked through the streets of New Haven, still amazed at what they had built. The temporary shelters were long gone, replaced by strong buildings made from the planet's strange crystal metal that Pete Collins had learned to mine from the mountains. The gravity that had once crushed them now felt normal. Jake could run, jump, and work for hours without the exhaustion that had nearly killed them in those first months. His body had changed, adapted. His muscles were denser, his bones stronger. When he looked in the mirror, he barely recognized the man who had stepped off the transport ship. "Morning, Commander," called Amy Watson from across the street. She was heading to the medical center, carrying equipment that would have been too heavy for her to lift back on Earth. Now she handled it like it weighed nothing. Jake waved back and continued his daily walk through the settlement. New Haven had grown into something incredible. The main street was lined with workshops where people created tools and machines that worked, despite the planet's electromagnetic storms. The interference that had once destroyed their technology had forced them to invent completely new ways of doing things. At the engineering workshop, Pete Collins was explaining something to a group of young apprentices. Among them was Kyle Murphy, now 21 and built like a professional athlete. Kyle had been just a teenager when they arrived, but growing up on Kepler 442c had changed him into something extraordinary. "The key is working with the electromagnetic fields instead of fighting them," Pete was saying. "Watch this." He held up a device that looked nothing like Earth technology. It was organic looking, with curved surfaces that seemed to pulse with inner light. "This scanner can see through solid rock by using the planet's natural energy patterns." Kyle raised his hand. "Can we make bigger versions? Maybe something that could scan entire mountain ranges." "Already working on it," Pete grinned. "Your generation thinks so differently about these problems. You see possibilities where we saw obstacles." Jake smiled and moved on. The younger colonists, especially those who had been children when they arrived, had adapted in ways that amazed everyone. They could run through the acid rain without protection, their skin somehow resistant to the burning droplets. They breathed the harsh air easily, their lungs having developed to process the sulfur compounds efficiently. At the agricultural center, Maria Rodriguez was tending to crops that glowed with health. The vegetables they grew now were larger and more nutritious than anything they had known on Earth. The mineral-rich soil had transformed their farming in ways they never expected. "Jake, you need to see this," Maria called, holding up a tomato that was easily twice the size of normal ones and glowed slightly in the dim light. "The plants are absorbing energy from the electromagnetic storms. They're practically growing themselves." "How's the food production?" Jake asked. "We're producing more than we need," Maria replied proudly. We've got enough food stored to feed 10 times our current population. And the nutritional content. People eating this food are stronger, healthier, and more resistant to disease than we ever were on Earth. Jake nodded and continued his tour. At the edge of the settlement, Captain Steve Blake was training a group of hunters. They were preparing to go after one of the massive crystal-scale beasts that roamed the outer valleys. These creatures had terrorized the early settlement, killing dozens of colonists in the first year. Now the humans hunted them. Remember, these things are smart, Steve was telling his team. But they're not as smart as we are, and we're faster now. Use the terrain to your advantage. Their crystal armor is tough, but it has weak points. Jake watched as the hunting team set off. They moved with a fluid grace that would have been impossible for baseline humans. Their enhanced muscles propelled them across the rocky landscape in long, powerful strides. They could leap gaps that would have been certain death 5 years ago. At the research center, Dr. Lisa Grant was studying tissue samples under a microscope that Pete's team had built using local materials. Her discoveries had been revolutionary, explaining the changes they were all experiencing. Jake, perfect timing, she said without looking up. I've got the latest results from the genetic analysis. What are you finding? He asked, though he suspected he already knew. The planet's electromagnetic fields, combined with the mineral content in the air and water, are causing rapid genetic adaptation, Lisa explained. Our DNA is literally rewriting itself to handle this environment. The changes are being passed on to the next generation, but accelerated. She pulled up images on her screen showing DNA sequences. Look at this. The children born here in the last 2 years. Their genetic structure is almost 20% different from baseline human. They're stronger, faster, more resistant to radiation and toxins. Their brains process information more efficiently. Jake studied the data. How different are we talking? Different enough that we might not technically be the same species that left Earth, Lisa said quietly. We're becoming something new. Something more. Later that evening, Jake stood on the observation deck of the central tower, looking out over New Haven as the 3 moons rose. The city sprawled across the valley, its buildings reaching up the mountainsides. Lights glowed throughout the settlement, powered by generators that fed off the constant electrical storms. In the distance, he could see the lights of 4 other settlements that had grown throughout the region. Each city specialized in different aspects of survival and development. New Salem focused on advanced manufacturing. Haven Ridge was their mining center. Crystal Falls handled research and development. And Stormhaven, built right in the path of the worst weather, had become their testing ground for extreme environment technology. Amy Watson joined him on the deck. Like all of them, she had changed dramatically. Her hair had darkened and her eyes reflected light like a cat's. The medical reports are in, she said. Life expectancy has increased by 40%. Disease rates are down 90%. And the children? What about the children? Jake asked. They're incredible, Amy said with wonder in her voice. Their immune systems can handle toxins that would kill us. They can see better in the dark. Their reflexes are 3 times faster than baseline human, and they're still developing new abilities. Jake watched a group of teenagers playing in the street below. They were running and jumping with superhuman grace, laughing as they raced each other through the heavy gravity like it was nothing. Sometimes I wonder what the Galactic Council would think if they could see us now, Amy said. Jake smiled grimly. They thought they were sending us here to die. Instead, they gave us exactly what we needed to become something they never imagined. Do you think they're watching? Probably. But it doesn't matter. We're not the same species they banished 5 years ago. We're stronger, smarter, and more dangerous than they ever feared we could be. As if to emphasize his point, a young woman ran by below them, carrying a piece of mining equipment that would have required a small vehicle to move back on Earth. She was humming happily as she worked, completely unaware that she was demonstrating capabilities that would terrify most galactic species. What happens when we outgrow this planet? Amy asked. Jake looked up at the stars, barely visible through the planet's chaotic atmosphere. Then we find new challenges, new worlds that will make us even stronger. He thought about the transport ships that had brought them here, still sitting in the valley where they had landed. Pete's team had been working on them, upgrading them with new technology based on what they had learned. Soon those ships would fly again, and when they did, the galaxy would discover what humanity had become. The aliens had made their greatest mistake when they thought exile would weaken them. Instead, it had forged them into something the galaxy had never seen before, something that could turn any Deathworld into a new home. High above Kepler 442c, hidden among the debris of an ancient asteroid field, a small Vorthak surveillance station monitored the human settlements below. Science Officer Thek stared at his readings in disbelief, running the scans for the 5th time in an hour. "This cannot be correct," he muttered, his reptilian fingers dancing across the control panel. The life sign readings showed not the declining population they expected, but numbers that had grown from 2.3 million to nearly 4 million in just 5 years. Thex activated his communication array and sent an encrypted message to the Galactic Council chambers. Within hours, he received a response ordering him to report his findings directly to the full council. On the council station orbiting Vorthak Prime, Admiral Kresh paced the chamber floor, his scaled tail lashing with agitation. "Explain these readings again, Science Officer." Slowly. "Admiral, the humans are not dying," Thex reported, his voice trembling slightly. "They are multiplying. Not only that, but they appear to be changing the planet itself." Zephyrian observer Yilsan floated forward, her translucent form shimmering with concern. "Show us the visual data." The main holographic display activated, showing aerial views of the human settlements. Council members from 12 different species leaned forward in shock. Where they expected to see desperate survivors clinging to life, they saw thriving cities with organized streets, advanced buildings, and bustling activity. "These structures," said Nexari Councilmember Prex, his crystalline body ringing like a bell with distress, "they appear to be built from materials native to Kepler 442c. How is this possible? Our surveys indicated that the planet's electromagnetic interference would prevent any advanced construction. The humans seem to have developed technology that works with the planet's energy fields rather than against them," Thex explained. "We've observed them mining operations that should be impossible, agricultural systems that thrive in the toxic soil, and manufacturing processes that use the electrical storms as power sources." Admiral Kresh's yellow eyes narrowed. "What about the wildlife? The predators we documented should have eliminated them in the first year." "That's perhaps the most disturbing development," Thex replied, calling up new footage. "The humans are hunting the crystal scale beasts. Successfully, they've turned the apex predators into livestock." The display showed a group of humans working together to take down a creature the size of a building. They moved with coordinated precision, using weapons that seemed to channel the planet's electromagnetic energy. What should have been a massacre became an efficient harvest operation. Yilsan's form flickered with alarm. "These readings suggest the humans themselves have changed. Their life signs don't match baseline human parameters." "Correct," Thex confirmed. "Genetic scans indicate significant physiological adaptation. Increased bone density, enhanced muscle mass, improved nervous system efficiency. The children born on the planet show even more dramatic changes." The council chamber fell silent except for the various breathing and communication sounds of the assembled species. Finally, Elder Vex of the ancient Corvani spoke, his voice a whisper that somehow carried throughout the room. "We have made an error in judgment." Back on Kepler 442c, Jake Morrison stood in the newly completed spacecraft hangar, watching as Rachel Stone's engineering team put the finishing touches on humanity's first indigenous starship. The vessel looked nothing like the transport ships that had brought them here. It was sleek and organic-looking, with surfaces that seemed to ripple with inner energy. "How does she fly?" Jake asked Rachel, who had emerged as one of their most brilliant engineers over the past 5 years. "Better than anything we ever built on Earth," Rachel replied with pride. "She doesn't fight the electromagnetic interference. She feeds on it. The more chaotic the energy environment, the faster she goes." Dr. Lisa Grant joined them, carrying a tablet with her latest research. "Jake, we need to talk about what we've become." They walked to a quiet corner of the hangar where they could speak privately. Lisa pulled up genetic comparison charts on her tablet. "I've been analyzing tissue samples from everyone in the settlements," she said. "The adaptations are accelerating. Not just physically, but mentally. Our neural processing speed has increased by 60%. Our reaction times are now faster than most galactic species we know about." Jake looked at his hands, noting how the skin seemed tougher, more resilient than it had been years ago. "What are you saying, Lisa?" I'm saying we're not human anymore. Not in the traditional sense. We're something new, something that was forged by this planet's extreme conditions. Rachel overheard and joined the conversation. Is that necessarily a bad thing? Look what we've accomplished. 5 years ago, we were refugees being dumped on a death world. Now we've got 5 thriving cities, sustainable agriculture, advanced manufacturing, and we're about to launch our first starship. That's exactly my point, Lisa said. No baseline human civilization could have done this. The speed of our development, the efficiency of our adaptation, the way we've turned every challenge into an advantage, it's unprecedented. At the medical center, Dr. Amy Watson was conducting routine examinations on a group of children who had been born on Kepler 442c. The results continued to amaze her. 10-year-old Sarah Kim could lift weights that would challenge an adult back on Earth. 12-year-old Bobby Shen could run through acid rainstorms with no protection and showed no ill effects. Dr. Watson, said 15-year-old Jenny Adams, when are we going to visit other planets? Amy smiled at the question. These children didn't think of space travel as something extraordinary. They thought of it as a natural next step, like learning to drive had been for previous generations. Soon, I think, Amy replied. The engineers are working on ships that can take us anywhere we want to go. What Amy didn't tell the children was what she had discovered in their blood tests. Their immune systems could handle toxins and radiation levels that would kill most galactic species instantly. Their bodies processed oxygen so efficiently that they could survive in atmospheres that others would find lethal. These children weren't just adapted to survive on Kepler 442c, they were adapted to survive anywhere. Meanwhile, Captain Steve Blake was leading a deep exploration mission into the planet's most dangerous regions. His team moved through landscapes that should have been instant death, areas where the electromagnetic storms were so intense that the air itself glowed with energy. Contact ahead, reported Sergeant Kate Williams, pointing to a massive structure rising from the storm-swept plains. Looks like some kind of ancient ruins. As they approached, they realized the structure was made of the same crystal metal that they had learned to mine and work. But this construction was millions of years old, built by some previous civilization that had tried to colonize the planet. They didn't make it, Steve observed, studying the empty halls and chambers. Whatever species built this, they died out. Or evolved beyond the need for buildings, Kate suggested quietly. The thought sent a chill through the team. What if the planet's evolutionary pressure didn't just change species? What if it transformed them into something completely beyond their original form? Back at the surveillance station, Science Officer Thex was preparing his final report for the Galactic Council. The readings were becoming impossible to ignore. The humans weren't just surviving on Kepler 442c. They were mastering it. More troubling were the energy signatures he was detecting. The humans were building technology that operated on principles the galaxy's greatest scientists didn't understand. Their ships, their machines, even their cities seemed to tap into energy sources that most species couldn't even detect. Admiral Kresh, Thex transmitted, I recommend immediate action. If we allow the humans to continue developing at this rate, they will soon possess capabilities that surpass our own. The response came back within hours. Recommendation denied. Continue observation. Do not engage. But Thex wondered if the Galactic Council truly understood what they were dealing with. The humans hadn't just survived their exile, they had used it to transform into something that might soon challenge the established order of the galaxy itself. The Deathworld, that was supposed to eliminate the human threat, had instead become a forge that was creating something far more dangerous than the Council had ever imagined. The Vorthak Border Patrol vessel, Death's Claw, was conducting routine scans of the outer system when sensor operator Vex spotted something impossible on his displays. Commander Thak, we have an unidentified vessel approaching from the direction of the restricted zone, Vex reported, his voice tight with confusion. Commander Thak slithered over to examine the readings. That's impossible. Nothing can survive in that region. The electromagnetic storms would tear apart any known ship design. But there it was on the screen, a sleek, organic-looking vessel that seemed to bend light around itself as it moved. It appeared and disappeared from their sensors like a ghost, leaving only brief energy signatures that made no sense according to Vorthak science. Sir, The vessel is transmitting, reported Communications Officer Lex. Put it through, Thack ordered. A clear, calm voice filled the bridge. This is Ambassador Kelly Brooks of the Human Colonial Alliance. We wish to speak with representatives of the Galactic Council. We come in peace. The bridge fell silent. Thack felt his blood run cold. Humans weren't supposed to exist anymore. They had been sent to die on Kepler 442c 10 years ago. Impossible, he whispered. Run a full scan on that vessel. The results were disturbing. The ship showed no metal signatures that matched any known construction. Instead, it seemed to be made from materials that pulsed with organic energy. Most troubling of all, it wasn't fighting the electromagnetic interference that plagued this region of space. It was using it as a power source. Within hours, the human vessel had been escorted to the Galactic Council's primary station. Emergency sessions were called as news spread through the facility that humans had somehow survived their exile and returned. Ambassador Kelly Brooks walked through the docking bay airlock, and immediately the station's sensors began registering anomalies. Lights flickered as she passed. Electronic systems recalibrated themselves without command. The very air around her seemed to shimmer with barely contained energy. She was tall, easily 6.5 feet, with muscle definition that suggested incredible physical strength. Her skin had a slight metallic sheen, and her eyes reflected light like mirrors. When she moved, it was with a fluid grace that made the station's gravity seem irrelevant. Admiral Kresh waited in the council chamber with representatives from 12 different species. All of them had seen the reports from the surveillance station. All of them had dismissed the readings as impossible. Now, faced with living proof, they struggled to maintain their composure. Ambassador Brooks, Kresh began, his voice carefully controlled, you claim to represent humanity. Our records indicate that your species was relocated to Kepler 442c for the safety of the galactic community. Kelly smiled, and the expression was both beautiful and terrifying. Her teeth were slightly pointed, adapted for a diet that included the tough crystal scale meat of Kepler 442c's apex predators. Relocated is an interesting word for it, she replied. Her voice carried harmonics that made the station's translation systems struggle to process. But yes, we've been living on the world you chose for us. We wanted to thank you. Thank us? Hil-san flickered with confusion. Of course, Kelly said, walking closer to the council table. With each step, more electronic systems began behaving strangely. Security monitors switched to random channels. Environmental controls adjusted themselves. You gave us exactly what we needed. She gestured, and a holographic display activated without anyone touching the controls. Images of New Haven and the other human settlements appeared in the air above the table. 10 years ago, you thought you were condemning us to death, Kelly continued. Instead, you gave us the greatest gift imaginable, a world that would force us to become more than we ever dreamed possible. The council members stared at the images of thriving cities, advanced technology, and humans who moved with supernatural grace and strength. Children played in acid rain. Adults hunted creatures that could have destroyed Vorthak battle tanks. What do you want? Elder Vex asked quietly. Kelly's smile widened. We want to share what we've learned. The galaxy is full of worlds that you consider uninhabitable, worlds rich in resources but too dangerous for colonization. We can change that. She walked around the table, seemingly unaware of the security forces that had quietly surrounded the chamber. Their weapons were trained on her, but she paid them no attention. We've developed techniques that can adapt any species to survive in extreme environments. Controlled evolution that takes months instead of millennia. We can make you stronger, faster, more resilient. We can open up entire sectors of the galaxy for colonization and development. And in return, Prex's crystalline form chimed with suspicion. Partnership, Kelly replied simply. We're not interested in conquest or revenge. We're interested in growth. The galaxy has so many challenges, so many impossible worlds waiting to be tamed. Why should any of us face them alone? Admiral Kresh stood, his full height making him tower over most of the other council members. You expect us to trust the species we exiled for being too violent and unpredictable? Kelly stopped walking and looked directly at him. For a moment, the chamber's lighting dimmed and every electronic system in the room flickered in unison. Admiral, you've been watching us for 10 years. Have we launched any attacks? Have we sought revenge for our exile? Have we done anything except build a better life for our people? Kresh's yellow eyes narrowed. Your very existence is a threat to galactic stability. Why? Because we've proven that your death worlds aren't so deadly after all. Because we've developed technology that surpasses your own. Because we've shown that evolution doesn't have to take millions of years. She moved closer to Kresh, and he could see that her skin actually did have a metallic quality, as if microscopic minerals had been integrated into her cellular structure. "You're afraid?" she said softly. "You're afraid that if other species see what we've accomplished, they'll start asking why they should limit themselves to the comfortable worlds, why they should accept the boundaries you've set for galactic civilization." The chamber erupted in angry voices from multiple species, all speaking at once. Some demanded immediate action against the humans. Others called for more information. A few voices suggested that maybe the humans had a point. Kelly waited for the noise to die down, then spoke again. "We've identified 47 worlds in this sector alone that could support massive populations if the inhabitants were properly adapted. Worlds with mineral wealth beyond imagination. Energy sources that could power civilizations for thousands of years. All of them are sitting empty because you've labeled them too dangerous." She activated another holographic display, showing star charts with dozens of systems marked in red. "We're offering to help you unlock that potential. All we ask is that you work with us instead of against us." Yilsan's form flickered rapidly, a sign of deep agitation. "And if we refuse?" Kelly's expression didn't change, but somehow the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "Then we'll continue our expansion alone. We've already identified several systems beyond your territory that offer interesting challenges. We don't need your permission to explore the galaxy." The implication hung in the air like a threat. If humanity continued to develop at their current rate, spreading to worlds that no other species could colonize, they would soon control resources and territories that dwarfed the current galactic powers. "This is what I propose," Kelly continued. "Give us a chance to demonstrate our techniques. Send volunteers from any species to one of our training worlds. Let them experience controlled adaptation for themselves. If they're not satisfied with the results, they can return to their original form. And if we agree to this, partnership?" Kresh asked reluctantly. "Then we share everything we've learned. Our technology, our techniques, our knowledge of extreme environment survival. Together, we can expand galactic civilization beyond anything you've imagined." The council members looked at each other uncertainly. The offer was tempting, but the implications were staggering. If humans could adapt any species to survive anywhere, the entire balance of galactic power would shift overnight. "We need time to consider this proposal," Elder Vex finally said. Kelly nodded. "Of course. But don't take too long. The galaxy is a big place, and there are so many worlds waiting to be explored. With or without your cooperation, humanity will continue to grow and adapt." She turned and began walking back toward the airlock. As she moved, the station's systems gradually returned to normal operation. "Ambassador," Kresh called after her, "what happens if we decide your proposal is too dangerous to accept?" Kelly paused at the airlock entrance and looked back over her shoulder. For just a moment, her human appearance seemed to flicker, revealing something far more alien and dangerous underneath. "Admiral, 10 years ago you thought you were sending us to our deaths. Instead, you created something that could adapt to any challenge, survive in any environment, and overcome any obstacle." She stepped through the airlock, her voice carrying back through the closing door. "What do you think happens when you try to stop evolution itself?" 3 months after Ambassador Brooks' visit to the Galactic Council, reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. Human settlements were appearing on worlds that had been written off as impossible death traps for millions of years. Science Officer Thex monitored the developments from his surveillance station, watching in fascination and growing fear as humanity spread like wildfire across the sector. Each new colony seemed more impossible than the last. On Infernus 7, where surface temperatures reached 300 degrees Celsius, and the atmosphere was pure sulfuric acid, humans had built a thriving mining operation. The colonists moved through the hellish environment without protective suits, their adapted skin naturally resistant to the extreme heat and corrosive atmosphere. On Gravitas Prime, where the gravitational force was 8 times Earth normal, human children played in the crushing environment like it was a gentle breeze. Their bones had grown denser than titanium alloy. Their muscles developed beyond anything in galactic records. Most disturbing of all was the colony on Radiation Omega, a world so saturated with deadly energy that even shielded Vorthak survey drones had failed within hours. The humans there didn't just survive the radiation. They seemed to thrive on it, using it as a power source for their growing cities. How are they doing this? Admiral Kresh demanded during an emergency council session. Our best scientists can't explain their survival methods. They're not using technology as we understand it, reported Chief Science Advisor Zex. They appear to be biologically integrating with each environment they encounter. Their bodies actually change at the genetic level to adapt to local conditions. Elder Vex leaned forward on his support platform. You're describing something beyond natural evolution. This level of adaptation should take millions of years. Unless, said a quiet voice from the chamber's entrance, you know how to guide the process. All eyes turned as Dr. Amy Watson walked into the council chamber. Unlike Ambassador Brooks, she looked almost human, but her presence had the same effect on the station's electronics. Lights dimmed and brightened randomly. Computer screens flickered with static. Dr. Watson, I presume, Kresh said coldly. Another human ambassador? Actually, I'm a doctor, Amy replied with a gentle smile. I came to make a house call. She walked to the center of the chamber, seemingly unaware of the dozens of weapons now trained on her. 3 months ago, Ambassador Brooks offered to share our adaptation techniques with the galactic community. You declined. Since then, we've continued our expansion into previously uninhabitable systems. Illegal expansion, Kresh corrected. Those systems fall under Galactic Council jurisdiction. Amy tilted her head slightly. Do they? According to galactic law, unclaimed worlds can be colonized by any species capable of surviving there. Since no other species has ever been able to live on these worlds, they were effectively unclaimed. She was right, and everyone in the chamber knew it. The legal framework of galactic civilization had never anticipated a species that could thrive in environments that killed everyone else. What do you want? Hilsan asked, her translucent form flickering with agitation. I want to help, Amy said simply. We've received requests from 17 different species asking about our adaptation process. Apparently, there are a lot of beings in the galaxy who are tired of being limited to comfortable worlds. She activated a holographic display showing messages from various planets throughout the sector. Desperate requests from mining corporations wanting to access resource-rich but deadly worlds. Scientific expeditions seeking to explore radiation-soaked systems. Even entire populations asking about relocating to worlds with more space and fewer restrictions. These requests all came through unofficial channels, of course, Amy continued. Because your governments have forbidden contact with humanity. But the demand is there. Prex's crystalline form rang like a bell with distress. You're trying to destabilize galactic civilization. No, Amy said firmly. We're trying to expand it. Look at what we've accomplished in just 10 years. New images appeared in the holographic display. Massive mining operations on worlds where no other species could survive. Agricultural systems producing food in environments that should have been sterile. Cities thriving in the hearts of radiation storms and acid rain hurricanes. Every one of these worlds was considered worthless before we arrived. Now they're producing resources, energy, and living space for millions of people. We're not taking anything away from the existing galactic powers. We're creating new wealth and opportunities. Admiral Kresh stood and began pacing, his tail lashing with barely controlled anger. And what happens when these adapted populations decide they don't need to follow galactic law? When they become powerful enough to challenge the established order? Amy's expression grew serious. Admiral, you're asking the wrong question. You should be asking what happens when other species realize they don't need your permission to evolve. The chamber fell silent except for the various breathing and communication sounds of the assembled species. 3 days ago, Amy continued, a group of young Nexari scientists contacted us. They want to adapt themselves to survive in the crystal caverns of Kepler 295b, where they could conduct research impossible anywhere else. Yesterday, a Zephyrian exploration team asked about modifications that would let them study the energy phenomena in the plasma nebula directly. She looked around the chamber, making eye contact with representatives from different species. You can't stop evolution, council members. You can only decide whether you want to guide it or be left behind by it. This is madness, Kresh snarled. You're talking about fundamentally altering what it means to be a sentient being. Are we? Amy asked. Or are we talking about becoming more than we ever dreamed possible? She gestured, and the holographic display showed images of human children born on various worlds. A girl on Infernus 7 whose skin could withstand molten metal, a boy on Gravitas Prime who could lift tons with ease, twins on Radiation Omega, whose bodies actually glowed with absorbed energy. These children aren't less human than their parents, Amy said. They're more capable, more resilient, more able to face whatever challenges the universe throws at them. Elder Vex spoke quietly. And if we continue to refuse your offers? Amy's gentle expression didn't change, but somehow her presence in the room became more imposing. Electronic systems throughout the station began operating at peak efficiency, as if her mere presence was optimizing their function. Then you'll watch from your comfortable worlds as humanity and our allies explore the galaxy you've convinced yourselves is too dangerous to touch. You'll remain limited to the small percentage of worlds that can support baseline life, while we adapt to thrive anywhere. She paused, letting the implications sink in. Eventually, you'll find yourselves irrelevant. Not because we conquered you, but because we outgrew you. Ilsun flickered rapidly. What if we wanted to discuss terms? Terms? Amy smiled. There are no terms. This isn't a negotiation. It's an invitation. She began walking toward the chamber exit. We're establishing an adaptation center on the border world of Haven Station. Any individual from any species who wants to experience controlled evolution is welcome. The process takes about 6 months for basic environmental adaptation, longer for more extreme modifications. And if someone wants to return to their original form, asked Council Member Dex of the Aquatic Hydrani. Completely reversible for the first 2 years, Amy replied. After that, the changes become permanent, but most people don't want to go back once they've experienced what they can become. She reached the chamber entrance and paused. Oh, and Admiral Kresh? That surveillance station you have monitoring Kepler 442c? We've known about it since the first week. Science Officer Thex has been doing excellent work documenting our development. We'd like to offer him a position with our research team. Kresh's eyes widened in shock. That station is cloaked with our most advanced stealth technology. Amy's smile became almost pitying. Admiral, we evolved on a world where electromagnetic storms would fry your best equipment. Did you really think we wouldn't notice a few extra energy signatures in orbit? As she left the chamber, her final words echoed behind her. The galaxy is changing whether you participate or not. The only question is whether you want to help shape that change or be swept away by it. 6 months later, Admiral Kresh stood in a medical facility on Haven Station, looking at his reflection in a mirror. His scales had taken on a metallic sheen that could withstand the radiation of deep space. His muscles had been enhanced to function in variable gravity. His eyes had been adapted to see across a broader spectrum of light. He had volunteered for the adaptation process in secret, unable to resist the opportunity to experience what humanity offered. Like thousands of others from across the galaxy, he had discovered that the fear of change was nothing compared to the exhilaration of becoming more than nature had originally designed. The Galactic Council still officially opposed human expansion, but their protests grew weaker each month as more and more of their citizens quietly sought out human adaptation centers. Trade routes that had been impossible due to hazardous space conditions became highways for adapted crews who treated cosmic radiation like a gentle breeze.